Sometime in the middle of that brutal winter, long before dawn even bothered to touch the sky, Sophie Bennett pressed her forehead against the frozen steering wheel and listened to the wind batter the stalled car like a living thing clawing for entry. The storm had swallowed the road behind them, the road ahead, and every ounce of safety left in her life. Lily shivered in the back seat, her small breaths ragged, a fever burning hotter than the broken heater could fight. Coyotes cried somewhere in the timber line, too close to ignore, too far to outrun. Then, through the blur of snow, Sophie saw a faint gold shimmer on a distant hill. A single light, a light where nothing should exist. She dug into the glove compartment for warmth and instead found a postcard, a photograph of a forgotten stone mansion, half hidden by pines, signed in her late father's blocky handwriting. Hartford Estate, 1983. The last peaceful place. A coincidence too sharp to ignore and too desperate to question. With wolves closing in and her daughter fading in fevered breaths, Sophie made the choice that would change everything. She wrapped Lily in every blanket they had left, pushed open the frozen door, and began the long walk toward the light, toward the mansion her father once knew, toward the only refuge left in a world that had stopped offering mercy. By the time they reached the abandoned Hartford mansion, Sophie could barely feel her legs. The massive structure rose from the storm like a half-buried cathedral, its broken windows staring down with the hollow look of a place that had been empty long enough to forget the meaning of warmth. Inside, the air hit them like a tomb, cold, stale, unmoving. But Sophie had survived war zones and machinery failures at sea. She wasn't about to lose her daughter to a house. She scavenged candles, tested pipes, coaxed the old boiler awake with the stubbornness of a woman who no longer accepted defeat as an option. By dawn, she had carved 2 habitable rooms out of the mansion's decay. In daylight, its secrets began to reveal themselves. Old ledgers, hidden drawers, photographs of miners and engineers from decades past. And then came Hank Williams, the mail carrier who trudged up the driveway with suspicion, confusion, and eventually the warmth of someone who recognized human desperation when he saw it. He became their first ally. Through him came supplies, local gossip, warnings about Maxwell Reed, an ambitious developer obsessed with acquiring the estate no matter the cost. Reed's black SUV came days later, gliding up the snow-ridden drive like a predator's shadow. His smile was polished, his tone rehearsed, but his eyes flickered with calculation. He offered relocation money, legal threats disguised as courtesy, but Sophie stood in the doorway like a wall. This house wasn't his, not anymore. Winter thickened, and life inside the mansion settled into uneasy rhythm. Repairs, boiling questionable water, rationing food, checking the perimeter for signs of Reed's men. When a pregnant young woman named Sarah stumbled onto the porch, trembling from cold and terror, Sophie recognized the same desperation she herself carried. Sarah's husband, a deputy, had connections deep in the sheriff's office. Taking her in created new risks, but turning her away meant condemning her. The mansion became refuge for 2 mothers and a child, then 3, then more. Word spread through the diner, the pharmacy, the church bulletin boards, people fleeing violence, poverty, cold, and systems designed to bury them found their way to the Hartford place. Each arrival brought new hands, new skills, new stories. Electricians rewired rooms. Carpenters repaired collapsing ceilings. Plumbers built rain collection systems from Sophie's improvised designs. What began as survival transformed into a community. A sanctuary, and that terrified Reed. He escalated. He sent inspectors with forged authority, workers who photographed utility lines, contractors who voiced false condemnation claims. When Sophie recorded their intrusion and forced them off the property, Reed changed tactics, cutting water at the county connection, filing legal notices, summoning officials who valued his money more than the truth. But the mansion endured. And Sophie fought back with every tool her Navy training had given her. Preparation, documentation, improvisation, strategy. The turning point came with a burst pipe that nearly destroyed the west hallway. Water rained through the ceiling, freezing on marble floors, threatening the fragile network of restored systems. Sophie and Lily fought the flood for hours, patching with beeswax, buckets, and pure stubbornness. The next day, Lily uncovered a hidden drawer containing decades-old clippings about the Hartford Mining Company, its rise, its collapse, its abandonment. And one name repeated through the articles, J. Bennett, her father. He had engineered a revolutionary safety system inside the mine after a tragic collapse, transforming its underground chambers into something else, something he had never spoken about. Days later, reporter Emma Shaw leaked Reed's real plan to convert the mine into an industrial waste facility, burying hazardous material beneath the county. Reed's resort development was a lie. His true ambition relied on the mine's secrecy and the land's isolation. But Emma's documents and Sophie's discovery exposed the geological fractures that made the mine unsafe, the groundwater risks her father had warned about, the contamination that could spread for miles. Suddenly, Reed's political allies backed away. Conservation groups swarmed. Regulators called emergency reviews. The machinery of quiet corruption began to stall. Yet Reed was not finished. He doubled down. Legal filings appeared daily. County inspectors circled the estate like vultures waiting for a final collapse. Sophie needed more than repairs and improvisation. She needed law. And law arrived in the form of Martha Jenkins, a retired property rights attorney whose reputation struck fear into litigators half her age. She inspected the mansion not as a relic, but as a battlefield. Digging into county archives, she uncovered something Reed had never anticipated. The Hartford estate was held in a 19th-century trust with a contingency clause transferring property rights to caretakers who maintained it during periods of family absence. Reed's foreclosure claims were worthless. He had never possessed legal title. Sophie, through months of restoration and protection, had begun fulfilling the requirements to claim the mansion legally. For the first time, the power shifted. The community rallied. Volunteers blocked unauthorized inspections. Hank delivered updates and supplies daily. Reporters camped outside the gates. And Reed, sensing his grip slipping, moved from manipulation to open hostility. But the people of Silver Ridge were watching now, and they were no longer willing to be silent spectators to his agenda. As spring crept over the mountains, the mansion transformed from a decaying relic into a beating heart of hope. Children played in the great room where cold drafts once ruled. Families cooked in the restored kitchen. Volunteers converted empty bedrooms into safe housing. Sophie felt the mansion breathe again, not with machinery, but with life, warmth, laughter, footsteps, purpose. And through it all, Lily recovered, her cough fading with the season's thaw. Sarah gave birth safely with neighbors assisting. Hank organized supply chains. The town slowly shifted from wary observers to proud allies. Reed's final attempt to seize the property, a sweeping condemnation order, collapsed under newly uncovered evidence of forged signatures and conflict of interest ties between his company and county officials. Public outrage spread. The state launched an investigation. Senator Simmons fled from Reed's side publicly, claiming ignorance. Reed's empire of intimidation began to fracture under the weight of truth, community, and the relentless power of people refusing to be invisible any longer. When the legal storm finally broke, it was Martha who handed Sophie the official documents confirming her status as the estate's rightful caretaker under the trust. Sophie held the papers with trembling hands, not out of fear, but out of recognition of every mile traveled, every night endured, every risk taken. She remembered the wolves circling their car, the broken heater, the first steps toward the faint light on the hill. She remembered the burst pipes, the forged inspectors, the quiet acts of kindness from strangers who became family. She remembered her father's postcard, the last peaceful place. It wasn't peaceful because it was abandoned. It was peaceful because it was meant to shelter those the world had cast aside. The mansion had not just been resurrected, it had returned to its purpose. And Sophie, once a fugitive mother running from a system that failed her, had become the protector of something larger than herself. A sanctuary born from ice, rebuilt by hands that refused to surrender, defended by truth, and held together by a community that discovered its own strength in the process. Months later, at the dedication of the new memorial garden, twilight spread across the Hartford grounds like a blessing. Neighbors, volunteers, families, all gathered beneath blooming trees planted where ruins once stood. A bronze plaque bearing Jack Bennett's name glimmered in the soft evening light. Sophie stood on the widow's walk afterward, gazing over the property that had been frozen when she arrived and now pulsed with warmth and purpose. The mansion was alive, its lights glowing against the darkening sky, pushing back entropy, greed, and the lie that abandoned places must stay abandoned. What began as desperate refuge had become a beacon, rebuilt not by wealth but by courage and persistence. And as the night settled in, Sophie whispered a quiet promise to the house, to her father, to every soul who had passed through its doors. No one would ever be turned away again. If this story moved you, if you felt the cold of that first storm, the fear, the hope, the rise, I'd love for you to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. And now, before you go, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it right now as you hear this story?